Yeah, well, welcome everyone. Welcome all of the 300-hour students who have been uh, with us for the last 10 plus weeks, maybe, going through our Health and Resilience 10 series, and for our 200 students, 200-hour students as well. And to all the community members who maybe were here with us for Health and Resilience, or maybe if you're joining us for the first time this morning, like Bridget. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, I see a few more people trickling in. Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone to Integrated Holistic Anatomy. So this will also be a series of 90-minute classes. The series is offered through Yoga X, which is a special initiative in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences in the School of Medicine at Stanford University. My name is Gino Carvalho, and I'm the program manager at Yoga X, and it is my great privilege and honor to guide you through this practice. Today, you will like to have some resources like perhaps a blanket and blocks, maybe a couple of blankets to soften the floor, and blocks or any other props that might serve as a block. Maybe it's a really sturdy water bottle or a roller or a roll of paper towels or something like that. A chair would be great, could be very helpful. A wall will also be helpful today. And sometimes a chair can replace a wall if you don't have some wall space. And as you gather your resources, take a moment to consider a seat for our opening centering. And just take this moment to settle in. I'm going to take this moment to settle into this present moment in this place, in this time, with this community. Perhaps that is a seat on some yoga blocks or a chair or a sofa. And if you've been with us for 10 weeks, then by now maybe you have some familiarity with how you would like to set yourself up. And whatever that setup is, just take a moment to become very curious. Become very curious about some of the discerning choices that lead to however you are meeting this moment. Maybe invite yourself to be really present. Notice if there is some intention in how you'd like to go about just this opening centering. Perhaps considering an intentional placement of your hands. Maybe consider an intentional placement for your eyes. Perhaps taking in the room, taking in the environment, maybe just lowering your focus down onto the floor or lowering the eyelids to half mast, or if it feels comfortable, perhaps closing your eyes and turning the focus inward. And as you settle in, just take a moment to notice what the body needs in this particular moment right now. And just consider if that might be a sense of grounding, perhaps bringing your awareness to your connection with the ground, your relationship with the earth, with your chair, with your props. Maybe just simply noticing the weight of your body. Maybe the body would benefit from a sense of expansion. You may invite a little lift through the very center of the tip of the crown of the head. Maybe noticing if the breath offers any expansion, just being curious about how the expansion might manifest in the body, but is also connected with the breath. And also become curious about how this sense of stability might be an auspicious thing to take note of at this time. Maybe it's that combination of grounding and expanding. Maybe it's just tending to a sense of your center of gravity or your center of mass or your center of self, the center of energy, muscular, structural, energetic. Just knowing that all of that is interconnected. I invite you to consider how you might stabilize through the breath. If it feels meaningful to you in this moment, perhaps just offering a bit of balance in the breath. Maybe it's feeling a sense of depth, rooting into the breath in some way, or just simply noticing that the breath provides this place to ground our attention, our thoughts, our focus. Maybe noticing how the breath expands the energy body and how that energy flows through the physical experience, just noticing how that experience of grounding, stabilizing, and expanding that connects the body and the breath might also be this invitation to find a little bit of space in the mind. Perhaps it's just a little bit of openness in the mind. Perhaps there's a sense of balance and harmony from the physical experience or the breath experience that connects to that experience of the thoughts, the experience of the emotions, stories, mind states. And as you embrace these invitations and sensations, meeting the body, meeting the breath, meeting the mind exactly as they are in this moment, and also noticing these framework of grounding and stabilizing and possibly expanding. Just becoming aware of your inner observer, this witness, this connection to an intuitive wisdom. Perhaps that leads to a sense of this seed of joy and this connection with our community, maybe a sense of gratitude. I invite you to bring your hands to heart center if that feels right for you. Maybe consider bowing your head if that seems inviting. Perhaps just consider an intention for our time together today. And if nothing's coming up for an intention at this moment, perhaps just leaving a little space for something that could possibly arrive later in our practice. Could be something that's specific, or it could be something that's just a felt sense. With an inhale, take a moment to breathe that in. And with your exhale, send it out. I invite you to lower your hands if they were raised. I invite you to open your eyes if they were closed, and welcome everyone again to our practice this Saturday. Welcome to Integrated Holistic Anatomy. So this series is about exploring wholesome and functional movement that you can practice here on the mat, and something that we hope that you're going to be able to experience and create stability, mobility, strength, endurance, balance, coordination, in all the ways that we can experience things in all of the koshas. And hopefully that experience is something that feels really accessible and translatable into all of the things that you may encounter in your life. So we're really looking to find a practice of integrated holistic anatomy here on the mat that transfers right into a lot of what we do in life, which is very much building on the 10 series and the integrated holistic yoga that we practiced in the last 10 weeks in health and resilience. And to do that, I think it's really helpful to revisit one of the themes that we kind of started with in the 10 series. And the koshas are this model for us to think of ourselves holistically, right? And for this class, I think I would really like to invite this idea that the body, when we think of anatomy, right? The body is not separate parts. It's not muscles and bones and organs or hormones, breath, thoughts, feelings, right? None of these things work in isolation. It's actually an amazing network of interconnection and interdependent systems, constantly co-regulating and unfolding in your unique biopsychosocial-cultural context. So in this class, we will honor your bio-individuality, right? So your anamaya kosha, your physical self, right? We know that all of our bodies are not the same. They're very different. And you'll get a lot of options in this class to consider what to do with your body to best serve your body. We'll honor your vital and effective individuality, your pranamaya kosha, your ability to perceive your energy levels, and perhaps an invitation to regulate those things, noticing what's pleasant and unpleasant or neutral, regulating them through the wisdom of your personal individual experience. And we'll honor your mental and emotional individuality, your manamaya kosha, this place where we meet our thoughts and emotions, perhaps our stories and our mind states. But we'll also honor the unique individuality of your intuitive wisdom. This Vyanamaya kosha, our observer and our wisdom. And now you've probably heard some of these things invited in this opening centering that we would love to carry into our experiential practice, into our breath practice today. We're also inviting this sense, this seed of joy, this Anandamaya kosha, that is this sense of our unified self, feeling interconnected individually, but also collectively. This is the context for integrated holistic anatomy. These things that cannot be separated, right? They're all connected and they're constantly unfolding. All right, I have to do it. So I have a little demonstration for our interconnection, right? We think about our fascia. I have this little model here of a pelvis, and I'm just going to bring it. I hope everyone can see. I'm going to put my black shirt as a background here. So we think about integrated holistic anatomy, and we know that all of these things are connected. Here we have a model of a pelvis that's grounded and standing on a floor here. And if we have some movement that occurs in, let's say, just the pelvis. So this is a pelvic tilt. And we can see that just the pelvis tilting has a connection throughout all of the body, all the way down to the points of contact. And that's kind of what we would call a closed chain, connecting the points of contact, these distal points to the floor, to the ground, to the earth. And then we could open that chain, and this is an open chain. And we can see how that also has a connection throughout the whole body, that there's not just moving the hip or moving the ankle or moving the hip. It's something that is interconnected through our fascia, through all of those systems of connection and all of our koshas as well. So if you're just joining us and you saw a grown man playing with his toys on the screen, you're in the right place. This is Stanford's yoga class. But hopefully that's a nice demonstration for what we will invite you to feel on the mat today, right? We might talk about a body part, we might talk about grounding in your pelvis or in your core, but we know that it's actually being connected throughout your whole body, all of your integration and all of these movements in the way that they are codependent. The other thing that I think is really helpful in kind of adding to the concept of the koshas that we covered in health and resilience, and now we're inviting for one of our themes for today, is also thinking about the koshas in a developmental context. So from the beginning, we know that we start in our development with these basic needs for our physical self, right? Our need to eat, to sleep, to move, to grow, to be held. That's our Anandamaya kosha, our food body, right? That first one, right? Needing to eat, and then that creates our bones, that creates our physical experience. And then it develops into the ability to notice our energy and regulate our energy and start to notice what's pleasant and unpleasant and perhaps neutral. And that evolves. That's our pranamaya, that's our vital self. And that moves eventually into the development of our thoughts and our language and our story and our identity. And that's our manamaya kosha. Then that develops eventually into, with maybe some maturity, some discernment and some wisdom, and that intuition that is often invited in these classes at very specific points. Which leads us to this essential sense, as we develop, this essential sense of unity and belonging, our bliss layer, our Anandamaya kosha. And that's generally happening through relationship, right? Not just with people, our relationship and connection through all of our koshas. With our community and with our collective is a really vital part of that connection, though. And so we're not isolated muscles, right? We are all connected. We are all dependent, interconnected and interdependent. And we are this whole and integrated experience with all of our systems, constantly engaging in essential dynamic relationships, these systems within systems. So that's the context for our class today, and something that we will invite for the rest of our classes in this integrated holistic anatomy series. And with that sense in mind, with that context, I invite you to find a place for your breath practice that will start our experiential practice. And I'll invite you to take a supine position on the floor, laying on your back. If that doesn't sound inviting to you, pick the seat or the position that is most auspicious for you. But the invitation is to consider finding essentially what might be like a corpse pose, like your final resting pose. And as you take a moment to find your place on the seat, just notice if you do need any props or would like to have some props that soften or provide a little bit of support, like perhaps beneath the back of the knee. And as you make your way there, begin to settle in. And as you begin to settle in there, as we start to invite a little bit more focused sense of presence, just notice if there's a need to move anything. Notice if there's a need to even just fidget for a second. And just note that need, note that tendency, note that sensation. And then make a discerning choice how to address it, so that perhaps it's satisfied in a way that can allow you to continue to invite this sense of stillness and perhaps embrace a little bit of grounding. You notice perhaps the points of contact with the floor on the back side of the body. Maybe it's this sense of weight in a different orientation from perhaps your opening centering from a seat. And perhaps just a simple scan of the body. Maybe noticing, once again, that center, wherever that is for you. Maybe it's the solar plexus, maybe it's at the diaphragm or the heart center. And in this supine orientation, perhaps also kind of noticing the outline of this five-pointed shape, this kind of star with the head and the two upper appendicular limbs and the two lower load-bearing limbs. Maybe just noticing some of the similarities, some of this amazing beauty that's evolved to create the human skeletal system that's connected to all these other systems. The large femur, the large humerus, that extend out and meet two pairs of radial and ulna, tibia and fibia, that connect out to small bones, 3 or 4 of them in both the wrists and the ankles, that extend out. And the number continues to increase into 5 metatarsals or metacarpals, into 5 phalanges, these digits, the tips of the fingers, the tips of the toes, that hold so much sensory information. Just noticing the whole outline of the body, maybe even becoming aware of the very tip of the center of the crown of the head as that 5th line. And grounded in the awareness of this physical, muscular, skeletal structure, I invite you to bring your awareness to the breath. And just notice how the breath moves through everything that makes up this physical experience. Perhaps once again, it's from that center out, or maybe there's a better way for you to connect to those sensations. And just take a moment to notice the qualities of the breath, perhaps just noticing the inhale as you breathe in, noticing the exhales as you breathe out, perhaps noticing a little bit of a pause between the inhale and exhale. Maybe just noticing how the breath and the body connect in this dance. Perhaps inviting the sense of grounding and the awareness of the breath. Maybe just inviting the mind to join. And holding the awareness of the body and the breath and the mind, I invite us to take 3 breaths together as a community. These do not have to be synchronized breaths. You'll still honor your individual tempo, pace, depth, rhythm. But at the end of your next exhale, we'll begin a cycle of 3 breaths together as a community, still honoring our individuality. Position on the floor. Still holding that awareness of the physical, energetic, and the mental, emotional experience. I invite you to just gently bend the knees and place the feet on the floor. And from this position, just kind of notice where the feet naturally track. Notice if that is a wide footprint or a narrow one. And we'll play a little bit by inviting a little bit of a wide base with the footprint. And from this wide base in the footprint, still feeling grounded. I have my head up just so that I can see, but I'll invite you to keep your head down if that feels auspicious for you. Just invite a gentle movement of the knees from side to side in this windshield wiper. And just notice if there's a change in how you would like to orient your feet. And perhaps noticing this internal and external rotation of the femurs in the pelvis and how that chain plays out all the way through the low leg, or maybe it's actually noticing how it plays out from the pelvis upward, or maybe it's both. Just noticing all that interconnection at play. Not just in the physical experience. Notice if your breath starts to change with this movement. Maybe there's a rhythm that you've already started to embrace that is rooted in some type of energetic sensation, and that there's some co-regulation going on between the physical movement and the movement of perhaps the diaphragm, the rib basket. And just notice how the ground becomes this teacher, this grounding ability to close the chain and exert leverage based on those points of contact. If you move your feet closer together, notice what happens and how that changes all of these sensations. Of course, the whole chain has a reaction, and you'll notice that there's a lot more involved. Maybe if you even were to lift your feet slightly, maybe that feels even better as you roll from side to side. Still making an auspicious choice that's honoring your unique experience and your needs in this moment. Just take a moment to notice the points of contact and the leverage, and whether or not your chain is closed with the feet down on the floor, or maybe your chain is open with the feet up. Maybe the grounding's coming from a different part of the body and energetically coming from something different as well. And just take another breath cycle or two to play with those variables, maybe noticing if a story is starting to come up, or maybe noticing if there are certain mind states that are present, or perhaps noticing that there could be the cultivation of some intuitive wisdom about how the body moves, how to find leverage. After you've taken your windshield wipers, come back to a center position, and I'll invite you to once again straighten your legs. And from this straight leg position, I'll invite you to take a moment to place your hands on your abdomen. So between the low rib and the pubic bone or the hip points. And with one or two hands there, just for a moment, lift your head up off the floor and notice what happens in the core. You don't have to hold your head here for very long, but just take a moment to notice the superficial engagement, maybe even something deep that's happening as well. And when you're ready, rest your head once again. We're going to play with this a little bit more and notice there's a number of muscles in the core that can help support us through a lot of our orientations, through a lot of our movements, and a lot of our postures or shapes and stillness as well. But as you place your hands on the stomach and you reach the head up off the floor, you may notice the rectus abdominis, this superficial connection. You may also notice that your obliques on the sides are starting to help and stabilize as well. And you may notice this engagement deeper in the pelvis to the lumbar. If you'd like to take one hand behind your head to offer a little more support, that could be helpful as well. One more time, let the head rest, and we'll try this
this movement with a little additional orientation. And we'll invite you to take your thumb to the low rib and maybe your middle or index finger toward the direction of your hip point. So you're just spreading that area with a point of contact with maybe both hands, or one if you'd like to support your head with your hand. And one more time, I invite you to come up and consider the breath. Maybe notice if on an exhale, if you can just become aware of the end of the exhale and what happens with the ribs. Notice if the ribs and the abdomen provide a little bit more stationary stability there. Maybe it's muscular, maybe it's energetic. You can even play with sticking out your tongue. And then once you've played with sticking out your tongue and that movement with the head, come back to this supine position with your head rested. And one more time, consider sticking out the tongue and see if you can still feel that connection of engaging and stable the core, the abdominal muscles as stabilizers. Maybe just noticing that lion's breath invitation of exhaling and sticking the tongue out. And then one more variation of this, just consider trying this with the mouth closed. Notice the breath cycle. And instead of sticking the tongue out, maybe just pressing the tongue to the top of the mouth, to the roof of the mouth. And just notice if there is that sensation, that awareness of the core as stabilizing muscles. Hugging our spine, hugging our center. And from there, sorry if you have to crane your neck to see this, but I just wanted to demonstrate our next shape that we'll play with. But you'll stay laying down. I'm just demonstrating from a seated position. We're going to come into a cross of the leg. So I invite you to cross the right leg over the left. And then perhaps taking the hands over your head, maybe with the elbows, the forearms crossing. And we'll come into this kind of banana stretch, banana skin stretch, as I often refer to it as, because we're going to give a little bit of a press with the right foot into the left foot, but stay stable with the left leg. So we have this action of connection happening there. And simultaneously, I'll invite you to just expand, perhaps invite on your own, in your own way, invite a little bit of extension in the right side of the body. And it's possible that you may be able to invite this with a subtle amount of movement. So we talk about the fingers and how much sensitivity they have. Perhaps there's just a light touch of the fingers against the skin on the elbow, right below the tricep there. And just feeling that stretch, that superficial stretch, the fingertips reaching, inviting the stretch of the skin, and feeling that connection as you press the right foot into the left, and maybe invite a little bit of a stretch in that right elbow, and inviting that opening in the right side body. And once you've had a chance to take a few breaths and notice that through all of your koshas and how interconnected all of these sensations are, cross the left leg over the right leg and start to set this up on the other side. Pressing the left foot into the right leg and perhaps inviting a little bit of an extension through the fingertips or through the skin on the left upper arm, leading to the elbow, with the fingertips just inviting that subtle sense of a stretch through that superficial layer of skin, and noticing how that might resonate through a lot more of the sensation throughout the body. Inviting a little bit of curiosity. If it's not there right away, then that's okay too. But maybe it's something you can return to. You can definitely take a bigger move on either side if you'd like to wake up that side body in a more deliberate way, in a less subtle way. Maybe you'd like to extend the arms a little bit more and clasp in that position. Go ahead and play with that on either side. If you'd like to play with the subtlety, you can play with that subtlety as well.
but just take that time on your own to explore those two movements and then return to neutral in center. And then when you're ready, from that center position, we'll take one more moment to play with rotation, and you may want a block or a pillow for this. So we'll take a block and have it ready on the left side, and I'll invite you to bring the knees toward the chest, maybe taking the hands into the knees, and then invite the knees to fall over to the left side. Now you may end up having a block beneath the left knee. You may like to have a block between the knees. Maybe there's a pillow or a combination here that allows you to come into this rotation in the pelvis in a way that feels auspicious for you. And then from there, I'll invite you to reach the right arm up and come into this kind of side lying position. So your shoulders are stacked and your pelvis is stacked. We're kind of in a side tabletop here. And we'll take a few breaths, inviting some rotation here. So invite the arms up. Maybe that's with an inhale. And perhaps there's an exhale, inviting the arm to continue in that direction. Maybe even inviting the right shoulder to come toward the floor. If it grounds on the floor, great. If not, that's great too. You can continue with the arm extended, or if it feels better to take care of the arm, the shoulder, you could always take your hand behind your head for this move as well. But just take another breath or two in this rotation, in this opening of a book. Notice the rotation through the thoracic spine. It's also opening up throughout the whole spine. And when you're ready, begin to set up on the other side, coming back through center and taking care, perhaps neutralizing or finding your center for a moment before proceeding over to the other side. And take a moment to set up a block or a pillow the same way that you did on the first side, taking that same care, noticing if that stability provided by raising the floor maybe allows for the shoulder to be grounded in a way that feels a little bit more stabilizing. And just consider what will serve you best in this movement. Is it to feel that grounding? Is it to go through the movement, maybe the movement that provides a sense of finding stability? Or maybe there's movement that invites a sense of expansion. Maybe it's something that's happening in one of the koshas more than another, or in a way that feels really integrated and connected. And after you've played with your rotations on both sides and feel like you have explored them, we're just going to roll right over so you can come from that sideline position into a tabletop position, gently beginning to find the floor in a new orientation on all fours. So perhaps the wrists beneath the shoulders and the knees beneath the hips. You may like to have a little bit of a wedge beneath the wrist, so that the fingertips end up landing a little bit lower than the palm, creating an obtuse angle at the wrist. You may also feel like just extending the arms forward a little bit helps with that. But once again, from this position, however you end up setting up, I'll invite you to explore the abdominal muscles once again as stabilizers. And I say the abdominal muscles, but I really mean all of our body working together for this, but really looking at that, inviting that sense of from the center out. So reach the right arm forward, coming from this three-legged tabletop. Notice if your sight line goes with your thumb and whether or not that's an auspicious movement. It might be more auspicious to be keeping your sight line down and let the back of your neck stay long so that the curves of your spine feel the same. And just notice as you remove one of the legs of this table and continue to reach forward and spend some time here, how the sensation changes, how the experience changes throughout all of the koshas, maybe physically, maybe energetically, noticing the breath, maybe a little bit of a mind story or a mind state. And when you're ready, switching to the other arm, reaching forward and inviting that sense and that different challenge on the other side, but still that same sense of stabilizing through the whole body, finding those 3 points of contact and still inviting the extension forward of the left arm. Notice if you can reach the left arm forward, but also invite it to stay connected to the scapula. Notice if the scapula comes way out of the shoulder, off of the back, and maybe the arm feels like it comes out of the shoulder. Just notice if there's something that feels nice about inviting it to come back. And we've been in this for a little while now, so I assume we have some nice, warm, stabilizing muscles. And from there, allow both hands to come down, and now perhaps finding a little bit of the cat-cow. And there's something here that maybe you felt even when you were on your back in the supine position, inviting the engagement of the abdomen. So think about how the ribs and the pelvis maybe come into that similar orientation to one another that you felt when you were on your back. That little bit of contraction, that little bit of engagement there. And maybe notice if there's also a connection of your lumbar and your cervical spine, these sympathetic arches, right? So as we let the head hang and we allow for the tailbone to tuck, notice how we decrease this angle, this arch in the low back, and we decrease here as we invite a little bit of engagement in the abdomen. And after playing with maybe a few cat-cows, just notice if there's any other intuitive movement. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's nothing intuitive about this movement, and stillness or a little bit of a break in the wrists is what feels most intuitive or auspicious. It can be really nice to shake the wrists out after some of that pressure, some of that compressive force. The shake might add a little bit of that tensile force. You can even give them a little bit of this in this stretch, right? So you're taking a little bit of space away from the compression that might have been there as you were loaded up on the wrist. And from that place of rest or intuitive movement, we'll just take one more moment in this tabletop shape with the wrists beneath the shoulders and the knees beneath the hips, or possibly slightly reaching. In fact, let's all invite the arms to just move forward a little bit. And then I'll invite you to flip the toes and perhaps lean forward and hover the knees for just a moment and invite that same kind of heat building sensation as you warm up those stabilizing muscles from the center, maybe feeling them rooted into the pelvis and the ribs as we begin to push the floor away and begin to invite the hips up and back as we start to straighten the knees. Perhaps inviting the heels to reach towards the ground. They do not have to be grounded. And just notice if you'd like to walk your feet back or walk your hands forward just a little bit so that that shape of what we've now reached into, this down dog, feels auspicious for you. You could always stay in tabletop. You could take a child's pose or a puppy dog pose here. You could always soften the floor with a blanket. From that down dog shape, perhaps taking a moment to pedal if that feels nice, and noticing that tensegrity that we played with the little toy, noticing how when one joint, when one leg, when one limb engages, how it sends those forces all the way through your hands. If I just bend the right knee, how you can feel that force in the hand moving all the way through. And then I'll invite you to play a little bit with this shape as we make our way to the top of the mat. Perhaps picking the feet up and having this little baby step forward. You can always find a chair or a wall. You can always walk your hands back a little bit if that feels more auspicious, but take the smallest little baby steps and invite even more sensation in the sole of the foot. And then maybe you can notice
that exact moment of the foot leaving the sticky mat. You can feel the mat and the texture of the softness absorbing the weight of the foot as you make your way forward into a forward fold. It might be nice to have some blocks, maybe providing a little bit of support in that forward fold. Wherever you are, coming into this forward fold shape in the support that feels good for you. You can always have a chair or a desk here as well. But take a moment to just kind of notice and acknowledge this orientation that's shifted for the legs now, being the primary load-bearing limb as they are supposed to after being on our arms for so long. If it feels nice to have a little bit of a cat-cow from this block position, just take a moment to notice how different cat-cow feels with your legs under you, with your feet under your knees. Maybe notice how similar it feels as well. And if it feels nice to invite a full fold at this point, go ahead and do that. And after a breath or two in your fold, we're going to start to make your way up to standing. So perhaps grounding through all four corners of both feet, bending the knees, maybe the hands come to the thighs, blocks, chairs. Push the floor down and begin to rise up, perhaps straightening through the pelvis. And when you're ready, arriving in a standing anatomical position at the top of your mat. And we'll take a moment to play a little bit with the footprint. So as we play with our mountain pose, our down or our Tadasana, I'll invite you to come into perhaps a wide-legged footprint. And as you come into this wide-legged footprint, just notice the energy here. Notice if there might be a sense of this kind of downward grounded sense, right? This wide footprint, this big base has a lot of stability, or well, let's say grounding to it. So just notice if there's this rooting, there's this anchoring, there's this sense here. It may not have the same kind of energy moving in the opposite direction or in a different direction. So as we play with that footprint, consider coming closer together, maybe even very narrow in a footprint. Notice how that energy has started to change. That downward energy possibly is now changing in your perception. If you have a wall close by, or if you'd like to play with this, notice what happens if you were to just gently lift a foot. Notice if that energy has now started to kind of go up and out. And just notice it on either foot. As you lift a foot, we've narrowed the base of support to something that is almost as small as we can get in our standing postures, almost. And in order to stay balanced, in order to achieve equilibrium, we want to feel the center of our mass, the center of gravity, in some way over our base of support, our footprint. So take a moment to consider what that would be, an auspicious footprint that allows you to take mountain pose, allows you to take Tadasana in a way that feels grounding, in a way that feels like you can also stabilize, but maybe also expand. Maybe thinking about the footprint, I think the first invitation I offered was 4 corners of the foot. Maybe for you it's 3 corners, right? That calcaneus, that heel bone, only feeling like one point. But maybe energetically there's an inside and an outside to it. Maybe there's a directional, maybe there's a direction that you would like to have your toes face. And just taking a few moments to feel the grounding from the bottom of the foot, the lower leg, the upper leg, and the pelvis. Take a moment to just feel the energy of the breath and the movement of the breath. And just notice if you would like to invite any other movement in the scapula or the arms. And once again, I'll invite you to consider the very tip of the center of the crown of the head and see if an invitation to expand feels auspicious for you. Maybe as you expand in that direction, it actually feels expansive in other directions as well. And from that space of grounding, stabilizing, and expanding, I'll invite you to slowly sink into a chair position. I think I'll give you a profile for this. So you can change your footprint if it feels better. Perhaps now that we've invited a little bit of a seat in this posture, maybe a wider base feels better. Notice if once you start sinking down, if the energy starts to drop out of the center, can we find a little bit of stability and invite this gravitational rebound of grounding down, but also extending upward? If it feels nice to reach your arms forward or up, perhaps playing with a little bit of that extension. And just noticing how everything is connected. Notice if there's a shake, notice if there's a wobble. Notice if that is a good thing that you came to experience, or if that's something that feels like over-efforting. And when it's right for you, you can consider to come out of this chair. If you'd like to stay, continuing to take inventory of a footprint, the breath, noticing the physical experience, the energetic experience, maybe noticing if the longer we stay, the more the story starts to go or a state starts to change. Taking the time to come out of the pose with the same care that you came into the pose with. And as you return to your mountain pose, just taking a moment to check in and notice any shift that's occurred. And so one more time, once again, I'll invite you to come to this chair shape, but we'll continue down. So take a moment to maybe invite that wide footprint. This one might be a little bit more helpful this time to have a wide footprint, and invite the hips to fall down. And maybe invite the hips to continue coming down. It could be nice to have that chair or block handy. And once you get down, maybe continuing to come down. If at any point you'd like to put your hands on a block or the floor, please do so. But once you sink all the way down, maybe there's an invitation to find the floor beneath you. And from that position, notice the shift in the kinetic chain, in the anatomy. We've come from closing the chain with the feet to maybe feeling the grounding of the chain with the hips. So take a moment wherever you are to come into this kind of boat prep position, sitting on the pelvis. And when you're ready, maybe playing a little bit with lifting one or two legs. You can take your hands behind the thighs. You could also take your hands behind you here, but perhaps notice if you can shift on your sits bones and notice what happens through the spine, how this undulation unfolds. Notice if you come forward, what happens to the lumbar? Notice if there's an arch that occurs, and perhaps you can even feel that in your cervical spine, noticing this interconnection, interdependence of not just the skeletal system, but all the other koshas. Notice if you come on the back side of the sits bones and what happens to the lumbar. Maybe that same kind of curve, that rounding that you also feel in the cervical spine. See if there's a happy medium, that balance between effort and ease, and then see if there's any expression in the legs that you would like to invite there. Maybe just holding the legs up is something that starts to build on the heat that you built in your chair pose. And then gently, as you're ready, I invite you to bring your feet back down, and then perhaps taking your hands behind you, or maybe continuing to invite the stabilizing of the core. Invite your arms to come down, or your spine to come down as well. Excuse me. Making your way onto your back, and maybe keeping your legs bent and your feet flat on the floor. So you're now finding yourself on the floor in this bridge prep position. And from here, I'll invite you to just take a moment to invite the hips up. Consider the footprint that's most auspicious for you, and just kind of notice if the arms can also provide a little bit of stability there. Notice if you can ground through the shoulders, ground through the feet, and let the hips come up and feel very light. Very different forces from that boat shape. You can stay here or come back down. Notice what you do with the footprint to find stability here. And I'll invite you to play with a little bit of stability challenge by bringing your base closer, so narrowing the footprint, and then perhaps just lifting one leg. Let it just be light and notice how that changes all of those forces. You can extend the leg up if that feels okay. And just play with that on both sides. It doesn't have to be something that you spend a long time with. Just note the shift, note the stabilizers, and note how it affects all the systems and all the koshas. And then when you're ready, after you've tried that on both sides, just gently allow the hips to come back down. And if it feels nice to just stay here in the supine position, you can stay here and just feel the breath moving through the diaphragm, stay in there. If you'd like to bring the knees in or have any other very intentional movement, you could do that as well. But once again, with your back on the ground, just take a moment to check in, noting all those experiences through the koshas. Noticing the physical, the breath, the stories, maybe some wisdom, and maybe just realizing that we're all sharing this experience together as well. And as you're ready, begin to make your way up into that boat shape one more time, inviting this moment of connecting to that core and finding the balance in the sits bones. And then as you're ready, maybe taking the hands behind and the feet back down, we're going to transfer back into that tabletop shape, but taking our time to do so. So sometimes there's a move in yoga where we kind of jump through there. Instead of that, maybe that's in your practice, maybe that feels really auspicious for you. But in the spirit of integrated holistic anatomy, when there's something that we kind of want to take with us off the mat, getting on the floor and getting up and transferring around on the floor, this floor that's such a great teacher can be a really great experience for us to just spend a little bit of time experiencing, a little bit more time in. So this little bit of movement from side to side kind of informs how we move and position our base, our grounding, how we move our center, perhaps even placing our limbs in a really intentional way. And just take a moment to notice if there's any habits playing out there before you very slowly make your way into that tabletop shape one more time. And then from tabletop, once again, we'll just invite the shape of down dog. You could always stay in tabletop or child's pose or puppy dog. And from that tabletop, perhaps stepping the right leg forward, coming into a low lunge shape. So you can soften the floor with a blanket. Or you could keep this knee lifted if you really want to. But from here, take a moment to ground down and stabilize. And just notice if this offering of grounding and stabilizing will start to kind of inform through wisdom and discernment how you might place your hands. So maybe it's just grounding the arms down. Maybe there's more grounding here. Perhaps there's a little bit of stabilizing to invite in this shape. Perhaps it's a combination of those. Perhaps there's an offering of expansion.
And you can still have the hands in that grounded offering and feel expansion and stabilizing. And you can have the hands in a different place and feel expansion and grounding. And you can have the hands in a place and really notice how all those things balance each other out. And when you're ready, just gently coming down from that shape into this tabletop or down dog and over to the other side. So make your way through tabletop or down dog in the way that's most auspicious for you. And take a moment to ground down, stabilize, and consider expansion on either side. And on either of those hand positions that make sense for you. Maybe noticing on this side how bringing the left femur and the right femur into the pelvis really does both of those things, provides the grounding on your base to really become aware of the pelvis and the stability there. Just letting the breath invite some of that expression. And then gently, as you make your way down and out of that low lunge shape, come back through to our tabletop shape one more time. And from tabletop, if you have a blanket here, you might want to keep it there. And if you didn't have one before, you may want to have one this time around. But we're going to invite the right leg to come forward into this straight leg hamstring stretch. So it might be nice to have blocks for this. And just invite the extension out. And notice, once again, this dynamic directional action that can play out here. You can keep a little bit of a knee bend and you can stay a little bit more elevated. And maybe invite a little bit of grounding downward with the right heel. Maybe even a drawing back, but an open heart. And then noticing if there's a leverage that wants to change, perhaps continuing to ground down and draw the femur into the pelvis and maybe keep the heart open. If this feels like a fun thing to play with, you're invited to stay and play with this. There's another option to perhaps notice what happens if you were to cross the arm, maybe to the shin, maybe to the outside of the foot. There's also an invitation in this shape to perhaps come into this rotated position. And if this feels like that's a lot of a transition, you may decide to create a little bit more space and just notice how that angle, that change in your base might have changed the way that you relate to the shape. You might even come all the way out to this gate shape. Wherever you are, just gently, perhaps coming back into that hamstring stretch if you left it. And then one more time, inviting this low lunge for a brief moment, reaching back up, and then consider this little bit of a side bend to the right side, maybe inviting that, once again, that engagement through the fingertips. So grounding, stabilizing, and maybe having the fingertips and the skin on the tricep and the elbow play with that invitation to open to the side. Gently when you're ready, perhaps coming back through that lunge shape, noticing the effect of rotating, grounding, and side bending
And coming back through this tabletop shape and noticing if stillness or a little bit of intentional movement and undulation in the spine feels good for you. Maybe you're looking for a little more fire and you really want that down dog shape. But wherever you are, begin to consider your switch to the other side. So you'll take the left leg forward and come into that extended shape in the kneeling hamstring stretch. Maybe there's a blanket that feels really nice to soften the floor here. Continue to feel the extension through the front leg, maybe the opening of the heart, and all of those relationships and those actions that we played with on the first side. But knowing that this side may have a very different story. Noticing if that gate shape is calling for you. Perhaps allowing for that dynamic rotation and also this larger base, this triangle of base might provide enough grounding to stabilize and maybe expand. And then gently making your way back to that hamstring stretch if you left it. And then coming into the lunge once again, allowing the hips to fall, allowing for the grounding, and then maybe inviting that sense of a side bend play. The elbows, or I'm sorry, the forearms over the head, perhaps recalling these sensations and these shapes from different orientations, but similar in sequence from one side to the other. I'm just noticing quite a challenging invitation to come into this lunge shape and then play with your lateral balance. Just taking a moment to notice how that played out for you and your nervous system, in your body, in your mind, and all the koshas as you begin to very intentionally make your way back to a tabletop just one more time. Coming back to this really stable shape, but now maybe inviting a little bit of a child's pose with the hips coming back. If you'd like to stay in a puppy dog shape, you can keep the heart, the arms extended and the heart lifted, maybe, or the hips lifted, excuse me. And as you come into that folded shape in child's pose, just take a moment to invite the awareness back to the breath. And just invite this turning of the senses inward. Maybe it feels nice to be able to close your eyes and notice if there's an invitation to slow down a little bit, feeling this deep grounding with the shins grounded and the arms grounded. And from that child's pose shape, in your own way, in your own time, consider a very intentional transition through tabletop, perhaps, onto your back. So we played a little bit with this transition from boat onto your front, and now very intentionally going from that tabletop onto your back. Maybe there's another spin of the knees and the arms, continuing to cultivate this relationship with the floor and the arms and the kinetic chain. Eventually making your way onto your back. And once you make your way onto your back, once again,
Invite the knees into the chest. And from that shape, see if you'd like to revisit the rotation from the beginning of class. Perhaps there's a prop or a block, a bolster, a blanket that you used at the beginning of the class. And as you set this up, just notice how things may have shifted. And just notice maybe there's a need for more support. Maybe there's more space and there's less need for props or support. But consider this in the context of inviting a little more surrender through all of the koshas as we begin to cool down. So maybe there is an invitation to connect with the floor with a little different level of that blanket or a little different position of that block. If it feels nice to move the arm once or twice, maybe connecting with the breath, maybe inviting a very slow rotation, consider doing that now. And after a breath cycle or two on this side, begin to slowly make your way into a rotation on the other side. And just know that one side might have a really different story than the other. Maybe there's a lot of shift that went on one side, and another side feels kind of the same. That's fine. But as you consider your props, consider this context of cooling down, inviting a sense of surrender, inviting a sense of letting go. Consider if you'd like to move the arm through the rotation and how that might feel a little different from a beginning movement in the warm-up phase versus a cool down as you begin to surrender. Once you've explored this side, begin to make your way back to a position on your spine. And consider how you would like to set up for your final resting pose. So once again, considering if you would like to have maybe a rolled up blanket beneath your knees, maybe a bolster. Notice if maybe you'd like to have a blanket that covers you if it's cold. But begin to think about how you might go about intentionally setting up something that feels like it invites a sense of stillness, something that invites a sense of quiet. Maybe there's something you'd like to place over your eyes if that feels inviting. Maybe inviting that sense of a darkness, turning the senses inward. Maybe it's as simple as closing your eyes. And then possibly that blanket, inviting a sense of warmth. Once you've settled into the shape, and beginning to invite this sense of release and inviting this sense of letting go, As you lie here, once again, check in with the body. Maybe once more, just inviting that sense of grounding, sense of weight, just allowing the body to be heavy. Gently tune into the breath. And just invite the breath to become soft. Maybe that's just noticing a gentle ebb and flow. Maybe just noticing a gentle movement in the breath. Just gently checking in with the mind. Just acknowledging anything that is present without needing to block it out or chase it away. And inviting a sense of surrender in the mind, in the thoughts, in the emotions. Surrendering into the deeper sense of intuition. Beginning to develop this sense of trust in your inner wisdom. Maybe grounding in that sense of trust. Maybe expanding into even a sense of joy. I invite you to bring your attention to the outermost layer of your being, your skin, this boundary between you and the world, the tips of the toes, the tips of your fingertips, maybe the tip of the crown of the head. Noticing this tensegrity with limbs that carry us, that hold us. And just explore what's present and tend to any sensations and any experience that emerges. And invite your attention to your breath. Just notice the gentle rise and fall in your chest and the belly, perhaps the movement of the diaphragm. Just notice the pulse of life that moves through you. Just explore what's present. And tend to any sensations. And invite your attention to the space of your thoughts and emotions. Just notice these patterns of the inner world, these fluctuations and feelings, stories and states. And just notice them as they are, exploring what's present and tending to any sensations. And invite your attention to your inner witness, this steady presence beneath the breath, beyond the babble. A part of you that simply notices with compassion and clarity. Explore what's present and just tend to any sensations. And invite your attention to the entirety of your being, across all your layers of self, your physical body, your vital breath, your emotional and mental self, your inner wisdom, and your capacity for joy. And invite a sense of wholeness from this place of integration as I invite you into 2 minutes of silence. Becoming aware of the air on your skin, bringing the awareness back to the breath. Just invite an embrace of these senses of the outside. Invite any movement that feels auspicious, whether it be a stretch or a wiggle. Take a moment to embrace a sense of vitality. Maybe just taking a moment to take a conscious breath in and a conscious exhale out. Beginning to think about a very intentional transition from where you are to a seat, perhaps rolling over to your side, taking all the time you need in the next 30 seconds to make your way to that seat. Once you've found your way to your seat, just one more time, taking a moment to stabilize, to ground, maybe offer a sense of expansion. I invite you to bring your hands to heart center if that feels auspicious for you. Perhaps closing your eyes and bowing your head if that seems inviting. Or maybe bringing your awareness to the intention that you set at the beginning of class, or noticing if any new intention arose during the class. Or maybe just noting something that you would like to take with you off the mat. And with an inhale, breathing that in. And with an exhale, sending it out. I invite you to lower your hands if they were raised and open your eyes if they were closed. Thank you all for sharing your practice with me this morning. It is such a pleasure and an honor to share this time with you. We'll be very happy to see you next week when Chris, the program director of Yoga X, will be leading us through an integrated holistic anatomy class at this time. We will take a little bio break